Hey Josh, welcome back to the Hidden Why podcast. Great to have you here today.
It's a pleasure, Lee, and thanks for having me.
July 4th, 2022, we recorded our first interview together, episode 1043 on emotional intelligence, EQ. So it's certainly your area of expertise, I would say.
Well, I somehow it's been 27 years that I've been working full time on this project, and as we're going to discuss today, I think I might need to do a better job on this because the world trend is not going in the right direction.
Right. Okay. Good insight. And I will ask a question on that. 27 years on this in this field of study and field of work. Do you ever get bored, complacent? What keeps you going?
I'm sure there are days I get I get complacent and bored, but what keeps me going is when I work with people and I see that penny drop and they say, wow, my feelings are the doorway to creating the future that I want. And I have agency. I can change, I can tap these feelings, I can change these feelings, I can use these feelings, and all kinds of possibilities open up. And when I get to witness that, whether it's with an executive coaching client or whether it's in our certification programs or, a teenager that I'm getting doing some coaching with, there's like this liberation moment. And for me, that is phenomenal.
Hmm.
Plus, I work with really awesome people. I mean, you can imagine, people who are like, yes, I want to work on emotional intelligence. They're
Yeah,
just really lovely human beings. So,
it's good, huh?
uh,
So
yeah.
get to control, you sort of said, get to choose my feelings, get to own my feelings, get to have more agency in doing so.
Yeah.
What does that
We use
mean?
the term, well, we use the term navigate emotions. And I grew up sailing. My dad was a retired Navy officer. And it was a small boat that we sailed, but it was a lot bigger than me.
Hmm.
And it's not like I could step out of the boat and like go shove, move it over here, right? Like when you're sailing a boat, you have to work with the wind, you have to work with the water. You have influence, but it's not the same as control. And you have to work with reality. You have to understand where you are and what's happening around you and engage that energy to help you move where you want to go. And I like this term navigating emotions much better than controlling or even managing
Navigating.
because
Yeah.
yeah, it implies that movement and that transformation and that harnessing, set the sails to get where you really want to go.
Hmm. Yeah, control sort of feels like you're trying to maybe push down some emotions, have more
Yeah,
of the
that's how I
ones that
grew
you
up.
love,
Yeah,
whereas
I grew up
you can't do
shoving,
that,
shove these ones
You can't
away,
do that.
right?
Yeah.
And you can try, it just doesn't really work.
I just had a great chat with another gentleman on the show, and he talked about letting the emotions flow through basically, rather than what we normally do is try and control them in some way, find a release,
Yeah,
whether it's bottling
yeah.
them up or taking it out in anger and, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't allow the emotions to move forward and on. It just continues them on. What are your thoughts on that?
If you believe, as I do, that there's value in feelings,
Hmm.
then how do we get the value? If we shove them in the closet and lock the door,
Yeah.
it's going to be hard to get the value.
Yeah.
So, the from a neurobiological perspective, emotions
Hmm.
serve to focus our attention and energize us. And when you think about, the title of your show, uh, they kind of reveal that hidden why. They help us see, oh, this is something that's significant to me. And when we have big feelings, it's because we're perceiving a big opportunity or a big threat or both. And the emotions focus our attention and galvanize us to be able to handle that opportunity and threat. So there's a lot of value in that as a human, as a leader, as a person, just interacting with others, trying to figure out life. What if we had this kind of GPS that was saying, hey, are you paying attention to this? This matters, right?
Hmm.
And that requires accessing emotions in a very different way than I think most of us grew up with.
100%. I love that. So emotions serve to focus our attention and energize us. And as it relates to opportunities and threats, that's why they exist. And you might see a threat as a bad thing. Obviously, you want to avoid, an opportunity is a good thing you want to move towards. Emotions can really help us hone in, identify them, and take the best out of that situation.
And get different perspectives,
Yeah.
right? And I think one of the problems that we have is that we get kind of set in seeing a particular way. We get on this path, and maybe it's not working so well, but we kind of keep sort of plowing ahead. And what if we had a way to look at it from different points of view? And I'm a CEO. I run an organization of people all over the world that I'm working with and supporting. And what if I had a way of kind of tuning in to different things that were going on for them and getting perspectives on what was important and how people were seeing things?
Mm,
And what if I could have that data for free just by looking at people and listening to them?
powerful.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, right. What do you do to become more aware of emotions? And I guess just to recap, I mean, we have discussed this in our previous episode, but what are some of the techniques we can do to really allow us to be more aware, I suppose, of our emotions so we can benefit from them?
For me, one of the first steps was to start learning more words. I'm a pretty rational person. I grew up with two statistician parents, and uh, learning the theory, learning how you can see a logic in emotions was helpful to me. And so I just started studying and researching. We have a very cool tool on our website. It's free. It's sucsec.org/wheel. It's the emotion wheel. And you can click around and go, what does this mean? What does this do? And oh, trust is the opposite of disgust. What does that mean? And kind of looking at this logic, it's just one of many models that have we found useful.
Why words? Like why words are good.
Mm. Well, literally, when you put a name to a feeling, that
Right.
is emotional intelligence, right? You're bridging this kind of cognitive part of your brain, what we use to create words, and this affective or felt part of your brain where you're sensing something.
Mm.
And so this act of naming it's literally emotional intelligence, these two different parts of the brain working together. And there's some great science around this. There was a functional magnetic resonance imaging fMRI study where they showed people some disturbing video and then said, name your feelings. And just the process of naming feelings caused the part of our brain that makes us kind of fight, flee, and freeze, caused that amygdala to settle down just by naming feelings. So there's a piece here about like when we name it, we get some sort of sense of a handle on it.
Mm. Mm. Okay, interesting. So the amygdala is where the emotions are stemming from?
The amygdala is triggered by emotions to move us into protection. And when it's triggered, it activates all these other brain areas, which causes us to either run away, flee, freeze, hide, or fight. And most of us prefer one of those three. I tend to be a fight oriented reaction. And so when I start getting agitated, I'll just like start getting louder and uh,
That doesn't
going.
that surprises me talking with you. Yeah. So what
Yeah, I've worked on it.
obviously. Amygdala. So tell us about the amygdala. So it's there, it gets triggered by the emotion that then causes us a behavior.
Yeah. And one of the things that's key and that really connects with the research we're going to talk about today is that we don't, it's not like we reset to zero. So we are, at any given moment, we have a state, and that state is physical, emotional, and cognitive, and maybe more.
Mhm.
And that state is a sort of precondition, or another metaphor. It's the pair of glasses we're looking through at that moment, and we interpret everything through that current state. And
Mm.
you'll have people saying, you know, well, let's just be rational. Well, okay, let's be rational. To be rational, we need to understand we're not just rational. We are filtering every thought, every appraisal, every piece of data through this current state. And when we're in an escalated state, when we're in a more of that threat-oriented state, we're much more likely to see things as threats, and the amygdala has become more sensitive. So as we kind of have a more dysregulated situation, people us around us are more dysregulated. What we're seeing in the news is more volatile. Our sense of security is lower. Our sense of threat is higher. The amygdala is more quickly triggered. You know, it's like that Paul Simon song, you know, imagine walking down the very same street on the very same day. But when we're in a more escalated state, we notice things that trigger us more and we're more quickly reactive.
Okay. So let's get into this research. State of the art, state of the heart of global 2024. Fairly significant report here that I'm happy to share out for anyone. I'm sure. Is there a copy available on your website?
Absolutely. sicksec.org/SOH, State of the Heart, or you can just go to our website and search for State of the Heart.
I can just stick the link in there. It's fascinating and alarming findings. Like you said before, you've been doing this for 27 years, and perhaps hoping that it'd get better, but it seems like we're in what you call an emotional recession in this report. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I keep year after year thinking, wow, this is really alarming. And this year, it's really alarming. We have 4 straight years of decline on every emotional intelligence competency, coupled with declines on all kinds of important life and work outcomes, including well-being. And what we're seeing is that something happened in 2020, and I assume it's the pandemic. You know, as in statistics, we don't know why something happens. We can guess, but I assume it's the pandemic. I certainly experienced this sense of threat and fragility and chaos and complexity and overwhelm. I imagine you did too. Probably led you to start a podcast or something crazy like that. And um, and we all have been coping with that. And I don't know that we've sort of really found our equilibrium again. But you see this, like all of these trend lines are sort of flat or going up. You know, no big changes from really 2015 to 2019, and then bang, this big decline in 2020, and then it continues in 21, 22. We thought it might flatten out. It flatten out a little bit globally, but it's because women started to go up in their emotional intelligence scores and men have continued to go down. And we now have the biggest gap between women and men emotional intelligence that I've seen in my years of doing this research. And the generation gaps are bigger than I've ever seen. There's so many areas of disequilibrium within ourselves and among one another that's really alarming. And I think we might all need to move to Australia because Oceania does have the highest emotional intelligence scores of all of the regions. So there's some good news for you.
Interesting. So when you say, when you do this report, global study, you said, was it 4 areas of competency? Is that how you describe it?
So there are 4 outcomes,
4
and we have
outcomes?
8. Yeah, and we have 8 areas of competence.
What are those 8
And
areas? Can I ask?
yeah, so I'll maybe just share them in 3 buckets
Yeah.
because that's easier. The first bucket has to do with awareness, tuning in to your own feelings and reactions. So those are the first 2. And then the second bucket we call choose yourself, and it's really connected to this navigating emotions. Navigating emotions is one of the ones in that bucket. And this is about being more intentional, switching off the autopilot. And there are 4 competencies in there. Another one that's really been hit hard is we call exercise optimism, which is about creating new possibilities. That's That's one of the biggest declines in the last 4 years. And
Wow.
then, so the first bucket was awareness. The second bucket was about intentional choice. And the third bucket is really about connecting beyond ourselves. This is really woven into the work you do. And I'm sure your listeners have heard a lot of people talking about connecting with why, connecting with people, feeling the sense that you're part of something bigger. And in this last area, we call give yourself. There are two competencies: increasing empathy, which has gone down a bit, and pursue noble goals, which is that sense that there's a longer term purpose that we have and we can put it into action today. And that's one of the other biggest declines.
Interesting, huh? When you talk about intentional choice, are there particular subcategories in that bucket?
Yeah. So the first one is to stop and assess. We call that applying consequential thinking. That's where you kind of go, wait a minute, is this going the way I want it to go?
Mm.
If no, then the next step is we call it navigating emotions, which is where you say, okay, so how can I direct this in a different direction? Engaging intrinsic motivation, which is about finding the energy that it's going to take to move in that new direction. And then exercising optimism, which is about seeing these new possibilities. And to switch transportation metaphors, I sometimes think about it as a train. And, okay, the train is going along the track. The
Mm.
know yourself part is where you notice, oh, what train am I on? And you say, wait, this isn't the train I want to be on. That's that first stop. Um, but the train is fueled by emotion. So if I want to get this train going a different direction, I'm going to need to use that emotion, pay attention to it, handle it. It's going to take a lot of energy to move the train. That's it, an intrinsic motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Do I see any other tracks? And if I can't see other options, if I can't see another track, I'm just going to keep going the same way. So this exercising optimism is really crucial for being able to direct my path somewhere
Mm-hmm.
new. I have to be able to,
Mm.
maybe I'm not sure what it is,
Yeah.
but I know there is an option and I'm going to find it.
So you've seen a big decline in that sort of area too.
Yeah. So the three biggest losers,
Mm.
engage intrinsic motivation, exercise optimism, and pursue noble goals. And the
Engage
way
in intrinsic motivation,
Mhm,
exercise optimism, pursue noble
mhm.
goals.
And the
Mm.
way I think about this, Lee, is, imagine it's a friend of yours. Okay. And you
Yeah.
haven't seen each other for a few years. And, you go out for coffee and your friend says, you're like, hey, how's it going? And your friend says, I just really don't have any energy. You're like, yeah, that sucks. And your friend says, and there's nothing I can do about it. You're like, wow, sorry to hear that. Do you think, can you make the future better? No. That's a really painful place to be.
Mm.
And your friend is a random sampling from 169 countries. This is a global phenomenon.
Mm.
And we've had some pretty painful decreases in those. And by the way, the younger your friend is, the more likely it is that they're suffering from those effects.
Wow. So a couple of questions. When you say there's been a significant decrease as a percentage or as an idea, what does that look like to put it in perspective?
Right. So the overall loss in emotional intelligence is about 5% in
Right.
these 4 years.
Okay.
But it's not equal. So one of the biggest losses is exercising optimism globally, 8.5%. Pursue noble goals, 7.7. Engage intrinsic motivation, 7.7. So those three are the biggest losses. And as I said, it's not equal. So, on average,
No,
men have declined more, and
and
younger
women.
people have declined more.
So younger people declining in emotional intelligence, men declining more in emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
compared to other gender, compared to females, and compared to older demographics.
Yep.
Let's get into the nitty gritty. What's causing? I don't know if this is part of your research, but I assume it is. What is causing this decline? Obviously, there's a whole heap of world issues that have happened in the last 4 years, but
Ye-
is it attributed to one thing? Is it attributed to tech, the pandemic?
Yeah, there's a term that we share in the report, which is I found pretty descriptive. The term is meta crisis. And it's this sort of constellation of all these multiple factors that becomes its own snowball effect.
Yeah.
So we have all these factors from kind of economic uncertainty, social chaos, wars, info wars, cyber warfare that's going on all around us. We have social media algorithms that are optimized to extract our attention and make us more reactive. We have the highest level of loneliness in the history of the study of loneliness. For me, the uncertainty, as a leader, uh, I used to really enjoy, kind of making a budget and preparing my forecasting and going to my board and saying, okay, here's the plan. I'm really confident in it. And for the last 4 years, it sucks because I go to my board and I see, here's our budget. And they say, how confident are you? And I say, I'm guessing.
Mm.
That is not a place I like to be as CEO, I'll tell you.
No.
Thankfully, I have a very supportive board, and this sense that we're all in this together. But deep uncertainty. There was a recent article called "Our Brains Are Not Built for Uncertainty," and I think that's a big piece of it. But the concept of meta crisis, Lee, is this sense that like these factors contribute to each other, they pile on each other. And remember what I shared earlier about the amygdala. When we're in an escalated state, we more quickly escalate.
Mm.
So, it's like you're walking down a street at night and it's dark and you're like hearing some scary noises, and then somebody sort of steps out of the shadows. You're like, whoa, that's really alarming. That very same thing happens on a, beautiful sunny day, and it's really not a big deal. We, as a collective, we are on a dark street and there's a lot of scary noises.
Right. That's a great way to explain it.
So I think that kind of volatility fuels volatility. And this is the piece about recession. Uh, I've been explaining the recession concept by thinking about economic recession.
Mm.
So when you have an economic recession, there's a number of effects that kind of snowball together to cause the economy to contract.
Mm.
And there's unemployment and there's a lack of cash available, and those kind of fuel each other, and then spending goes down, and as spending goes down, companies start saying, oh, we better hold on to our cash because we're not sure, there's uncertainty, and those things fuel each other.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So an economic recession is a contraction, a sustained contraction of the output of our economy. I think an emotional recession is a sustained contraction of the input, the human energy that drives the economy, that drives the society. And I don't know how it's been for you and folks listening. We're hearing a lot about burnout. We're seeing a lot of data, including in the state of the heart research about burnout, uh, this kind of human energy crisis. And that, as we kind of contract our energy and we're in this exhausted place, we have less to give. We have less effort we can put in.
Mm. Mm.
And we're seeing this sustained contraction in that input, that energy that drives society, drives life.
Yeah. I guess in reference to the economic productivity and the output, we will go through that, but then we'll improve. Can you see the same mechanisms helping improve the emotional intelligence? Or
Yeah.
once depleted, does it become really too hard to, because it's a whole different thing, the human game and, output and productivity?
Well, I mean, I'm not an economist, but my understanding is that if governments, businesses, people don't take action in a recession, it gets worse and worse and worse, becomes a depression, it becomes a Great Depression,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And we've seen that a few times in history,
Mm.
where the sort of small contraction escalates or spirals downward. I think the same thing is true in an emotional recession. It's absolutely something we can address. And I think the antidote is very similar to an economic recession. It takes concerted, sustained efforts. In an economic recession, for example, one of the things that governments do is they make more cash available. They make it easier for you to borrow, for businesses to grow and say, okay, well, we need to infuse
Right.
cash into the
Yeah.
economy. So, all right, in an emotional recession, we have this lack of energy. So how do we infuse energy into society? How, as not just us as individuals, because we see this all the time, like, oh, Lee, you gotta, you're burned out. Go do yoga, man. Right? It's like, okay, yeah, sure, but like, can we do more? Is this just your responsibility to fix this?
Mm.
Or is this a shared responsibility?
Well, it's got to be a shared responsibility.
And I think that's in a similar way, this uh, economic recession, we take it seriously. And governments and businesses and individuals, there's a public-private partnership, which is like, we got to do something about this. And we have policy that we put in place. But I don't see that happening with the emotional recession.
No.
With with the emotional recession, I see, the sort of narrative of, yeah, this sucks for you. You better take care of
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. Leave it to the individual to try and figure out themselves, otherwise too bad, sort of thing. Which obviously won't be good for the society longer term if that's the mentality that we use going forward. What are some of the solutions you would propose for the government to look at as far as improving the emotional intelligence?
Well, I see some governments paying more and more attention to well-being. Uh, World Health Organization is talking more about it. The US Surgeon General is talking about it and sort of saying we need frameworks, we need to invest in this. There is actually some money that's been going into well-being, but it's still very clinical. And there tends to be a focus on like, okay, well, let's have more therapists, which is great, I don't but that's still only addressing a pretty small group of people. I think we need millions of people with more emotion skills. And again, a governmental response to economic recession is to focus on job skills and job growth for the future. So what if we said, hey, you know what? We need social emotional skills at a widespread level. We need every teacher to learn these skills. We need every manager to learn these skills. We need every parent to learn these skills. Let's really make this stuff available at scale.
Mm.
And one of the things that the organization that I run has been doing is making social emotional skills available. Uh, we we pay our bills by selling this kind of training to corporations, but our largest project is entirely free and open source. It's our partnership with UNICEF World Children's Day, and literally millions of children and adults have gotten to start learning these social and emotional skills entirely for free in 200 countries and territories, driven by this incredible group of volunteers. So that is the kind of like infrastructure development. And I
Mm.
literally just came out of a meeting at UNICEF an hour ago. We're talking about what we're going to be working on this year and how we're going to grow this and how we're going to strengthen these public-private partnerships, strengthen these community efforts. between individuals, between businesses, between government agencies to say, hey, this stuff is learnable. And by the way, it's pretty fun and it's effective. And for a really low cost, we can make this accessible to lots and lots and lots of people.
Mm.
So I think that's the
Education front, and from a younger, I often wonder about that. Like, what are they doing at schools to battle what's coming? And I don't think there's much going on. They're just
not
using more of
enough.
what's coming to do what they're doing. So yeah, not enough potentially. Is a more polite way to put it.
The other thing,
yeah.
I'll just add, the other thing is from an organizational perspective.
Mm.
You think about, I just had a meeting yesterday with a leader in a huge organization saying, okay, what do we need to do to shift our culture with hundreds of thousands of people? How do we, what is the strand of DNA we can add here? And a lot of my work is in training coaches. And I found that coaching as a methodology is a really effective way for us to bring this into our organizational work, educational work, civic work.
Yeah.
So, we're working with cities, we're working with big governments, we're working with large corporations to say, okay, so let's build these muscles. And coaching is a kind of process that we can use to strengthen one another in a non-clinical way.
Mm. There's a lot of work to be done. I can see the burnout and the reasons, in my perspective of the world and what's going on, and in my own personal life of how this is building up in people, and the reason for decline in these few areas that you talk about. So yeah, and if we don't do something about it, it'll obviously probably get worse and at a more rapid scale, I would guess.
I would guess that as well.
Have you got any forecasts for what's ahead in the next few years?
Well, I'd love to be wrong, but I don't see enough effort being made right now.
Yeah.
And so my guess is it's going to be worse.
Mm-hmm.
I see political polarization increasing. I see this kind of, we've had, the hottest summer on record for 4 years in a row. Maybe it won't be 5 years, maybe it will, but we're, that the sort of the wobble, the instability
There's uncertainty and
seems
tension.
Yeah, that seems to be increasing. And the way we react to that is, again, to become more volatile.
Yeah.
And volatility is exactly what we don't need in this situation.
Yeah. Josh, been a fantastic interview. Thank you for coming on again today. I'll put all the links in the show notes. The website, guys, is 6seconds.org. So check it out there and reach out to Josh and thank him for coming on the show as well. Josh, thank you so much. Second round. Great.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks, everyone.
Keep up the good work, mate. Till next time, peace, passion, and purpose. See you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fantastic conversation.